I always end up getting exasperated with you. I'm like, why why does the US keep on allowing this to happen? Or why
Yeah,
doesn't Israel understand that it's putting itself at risk, and if it wants to for its own self-preservation, why doesn't it take a more rational, pragmatic approach instead of just carpet bombing? And I
yeah,
understand that there's this idea of just projecting dominance, and they've been dominant for so long, but we've had plenty of examples to show that, hey, the winds have changed and they're no
right.
longer in your favor, but they keep on going on. So I'm thinking maybe you can help me. I know I've asked this kind of question before, but just kind of, what is is it really just this religious drive behind Zionism that is just pushing this force forward, that this idea that we are the chosen people and that we are going to create Israel, and that there is an apocalyptic element in this, that
Oh
that
yeah.
things are scary, but that's about the end times. I mean, can you explain that? I mean, what is the religious belief, the fanaticism behind it? That's really what's keeping this thing moving forward and not allowing, I think, the people of Israel to be rational, and it's putting their whole existence at
Yeah.
risk.
Yeah, well, there certainly is a religious aspect. There are religious factions in Zionism, but I think it's a mistake to overplay that. I mean, it's important, as people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they're examples of the extreme religious Zionists. And these people have an interest in tearing down the Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuilding the third temple, or building the third temple, right?
Can you
And
explain why is that the idea? While they bring the Messiah? Is that, I don't know much about
no,
the history.
okay, that's in Christian Zionism. Okay, but I'll tell you, the Christian Zionism in a way is a kind of a Judaized, or certain aspects is a highly Judaized version of Christianity. So their idea of bringing the Messiah is, well,
Let's bring
actually,
him to
I
the end
don't
of the
know.
world, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, there's a great deal of overlap. I don't want to get into the details because actually they're kind of fuzzy in my head right now. But
okay.
what I wanted to say is that, okay, there is this religious aspect to it, but it's a mistake to kind of pin it on the religious fanatics, because first, it was the secular Zionists that created Israel, that established Zionism, and that carried out the Nakba, and just created the mess that is Israel today. I mean, they who also cooperated in the colonization of the West Bank. It was none of that could happen without the cooperation and the support of the secular Zionists. And today, don't forget that, like, Netanyahu and Gallant, these people are secular. They're not religious Jews. And then the IDF leadership, by and large, is secular. A lot of people say, oh, it's just like the IDF. They're the voice of reason. Well, they're the ones that are carrying out the genocide, in Gaza, and the beginnings of a genocide in Lebanon. Yeah, they may talk more reasonably, but they're really all on the same page. So I think it's a mistake to yeah, the religious aspect of Israel, but it's a mistake to play that up and say that's the problem. It's Zionism in itself. It's this.
Well, to me, Zionism is almost a religion in itself, right?
Yeah,
That, I
well,
mean,
that's
this
true. I
belief
mean, it's
that
true of all kinds of ideologies. I mean, the secular people pride themselves on being rational, but they can become just as fanatic about some ideology as a religious person can, and they do. That's the whole history of the 20th century. Communism and Nazism and so forth. These were all ideologies that had fanatic adherents, right? That ended up creating the great conflicts of the 20th century, and they were all secular, and Zionism was part of that. Was not
right
part of that, but existed too. It grew out of the same circumstances.
is kind of a pillar of Zionism, though, supremacist. That this idea that we are the chosen people, and that this is inherently our this is just our
Right.
right, our destiny,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
That's a
Well, I
very
think there's no,
religious type of
yeah, right. I think there's no question
sentiment.
about that. That it was, I think it was, no question, it was always there. It was not explicit in early Zionism. And in fact, the early Zionists, and the ones that are charged, well into the 1970s, were socialists, and they mouthed egalitarian platitudes, and that's one reason why you had such strong support for them, within the Western left. But I think it was always there. It had to be there because you just look at their actions. In the end, it's like, this land is ours, and I'm sorry, maybe you people have lived in this village for so many millennia, but it's now ours because we're the Jews.
Do you think that's one of the main reasons that they're in this pickle they're in now, is just because of this supremacist attitude that allowed them to underestimate their enemies so incredibly, to such an extent? I mean,
sure.
even in Gaza, I feel like they did that. They underestimated the capabilities of Hamas, which is just Gaza's an open air prison with very limited capabilities, and I think they've done the same thing with Hezbollah, the same thing with the Houthis. They like to make fun of them as that they're all just backwoods, just people digging around in the sand, and they have no capabilities whatsoever.
Yeah.
And this is what it's got them. I think that thinking.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's not really unique to Zionism. I think that's kind of a typical Western attitude. It's just that, again, the Israelis, just like NATO and the U.S., are in a lot of ways are still living in the past. We talked about how, the reality has changed, but the consciousness, the awareness hasn't. Israel is, assumed itself to be invincible. It was for a long time, for decades. There was really, it had no rivals in the region, and it just became sort of. I think that after some point you start to think, well, this is just, us by nature. We are the superior people, and we are invincible. But no, it was a certain set of circumstances. And again, it's the same thing with NATO. It's just that, hey, the other side can catch up. You can make mistakes. You can misallocate resources. You can make strategic blunders. And Israel's done that, and NATO has done that. And they're now faced with very powerful adversaries, and it's just hard for them to deal with that. They're still living in the past in so many ways. It's just like they just won't admit their weakness. They're going to have to quickly, but I think it appears to be very, very hard for them to do that.
It just seems like one of the oldest lessons of war that everybody knows is don't underestimate your enemy. Always have respect for your adversary. How did we forget that lesson?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, well, it's all part of the same process. I mean, it's just again, I think we've been blinded by our sense of invulnerability and virtue, that it's just, it's a kind of a spiritual vanity on a grand scale. And it's actually made us actually quite vulnerable. It's put us in a very vulnerable position. Yeah, because again, it's best to be cautious, to fear your enemy, and to prepare accordingly. And clearly, Israel hasn't prepared for war with Iran, and the U.S. hasn't either.